Hey everybody, it's great to have you back. And this podcast today is one of the most important episodes I'm going to ever record. And the reason I say that is because this is one of the biggest problems every small business owner, solopreneur faces. So I did a survey recently, and I've faced this problem. I did a survey recently, and 43% of people said they started their business for more freedom and flexibility. And there was no close second. Money was actually the least one, but the runner up was actually purpose and a sense of mission. So it's clear that a lot of the people who go into business do so not primarily because of money. Of course, we all want to make better money. Of course, that's the case. But primarily, we launch businesses, we go quit our jobs, we go on our own because we want that freedom and flexibility. Now, when I've been on my journey, I've made the mistake I'm going to talk about today. I've made it a few times. And when you realize what I'm going to share with you today, the kind of logic of it makes sense, but actually the feeling of it, the emotions around it doesn't make sense. And I've been grappling with how to communicate this for a long time. So you've started your business. Now you're trying to launch it, and 9 times out of 10, you are not a marketing person launching a business. You're not a salesperson launching a business. That is, if you look at the vast majority of people who start businesses, they are not sales and marketing people. They are subject matter experts. They are skilled people. And so suddenly you have to go through this process of having to market yourself. And there are a million pitfalls in that. I've faced a few. And I'll just talk about a few of the pitfalls. The first pitfall is focus. When you first start, you scramble around trying to drum up business, right? You scramble around like a crazy person. You leverage the people you know. You leverage old contacts. You do everything to make some noise to actually build your business. And that is a good strategy that will get you so far. It will get you off the ground and get you making some money. But that crazy phase, you can't sustain that crazy phase because you have to run around at 1,000,000 miles an hour, and it kind of conflicts with the reason you started the business. We all, of course, have to do crazy things at times, and especially when we're getting started, we have to throw the kitchen sink at our business. But a lot of people never get out of that crazy phase. What they do is double down on it. So that crazy phase gets them going and they start making some money, but then they have a dip and they double down on the crazy phase. More craziness, more effort, more energy, more everything to try and drum up business. And it does work. The problem is you eventually either burn yourself out or have to take yourself up to a level that is totally unsustainable and you can't do it. And then you have what is infamously known as feast and famine. In other words, what happens is you go from no work and scrambling around for work to incredibly busy, and then you go back into the famine phase, and then you scramble around like a crazy person and go back into, and you get how this goes, the feast and famine scenario. And it actually stems from not having a system to actually propel your business that you can run in the time you have. Now, with social media, this crazy phase can actually be taken to whole new levels. And take this in the spirit that I'm sharing it in. I'm not here to throw other people under the bus. But what happens is that people lose sight of all of common sense when they're going through feast and famine, and they buy fixes. So what will happen is solopreneur will be going through this feast and famine phase, and along comes somebody with their amazing system to transform your life. They're parked up with a Lamborghini, or they're telling you about their amazing success and how they've built the freedom that they have, and they've got this amazing course that is just $47 or whatever that will change your life. And of course, I'm conscious of the semi-hypocrisy here because I sell courses to help people with LinkedIn. But one of the things that I think is really, really important here is that, and I had a conversation with somebody about this the other day, is often what people are doing is marketing to people who are in that feast and famine and saying to them, look how amazing my world is, and you can have my world if you buy my course. But the reality is their world is not your world. And so trying to transpose somebody's course of their success on LinkedIn or their success on Facebook or Instagram into your business is not actually that easy. It's actually very difficult. And there's a reason why. Scary numbers here. There's a reason why the completion rate of online courses is less than 13%. Less than 13% of people actually complete a course. And God knows how few actually implement the course. And the reason being is often the course is designed, and I've been on them, I've bought them, and I'm trying to do things a little differently, is that the course is teaching you to do stuff that is totally unsustainable. It's like totally unsustainable. Like, for an example, if you're in a feast and famine mode, which a lot of businesses are, it's not that your business is bad, it's you're in a cycle and you need to change that cycle. And they will give you what are long-term solutions that you cannot do right now. For an example, I teach people how to do this myself, but I know that outbound commenting and using content on social media to get clients and make sales in the long term is a massive, massive win. However, Goldman Sachs has done all the data on this. It takes somebody around 17 months of doing that to be able to even draw down a salary and be financially viable, earning a salary. And so what happens is the allure in this feast and famine, when you're in this feast and famine mentality, the allure of lots of followers and lots of engagement, generating lots of revenue doesn't happen, and it can't happen, and it doesn't happen for other people. There is a reason why many of the people who propagate this content-focused model are solopreneurs. It's because there's not enough money in it unless you go stratospheric. By that, I mean the top 4% of content creators are actually making more than $100,000 a year, which is about 87 grand in pounds. And so we get suckered in to doing things that are, by perception, looking at them will change things when actually they won't. And I want to talk to you about, because I've done this, I've made this mistake. I've made the mistake of trying to go big, bold everywhere. And what happens is you spread your energy too thin, you drain yourself. And of course, anything that's big and bold will need multi-touch. So for an example, and this is true of content, it's true of outreach, it's true of any kind of outbound, any kind of marketing effort whatsoever. Trying to get conversion in as few interactions as possible takes high skill. In other words, if you want to try and convert people it's going to be a process. If you're going to try and win clients, it's going to be a process. It's not going to be you post one thing and people convert. They will need to see 20, 30 different pieces of content. It's not going to be that one message you send out. It's going to be a cadence of activity to get a client from outbound messaging. Every form of marketing, and anybody who disagrees with me is probably a shyster, because all the marketing, the heavyweights of marketing will tell you it is, if you don't have an established brand, if your market has never heard of you before, it is very difficult to get conversion from one touch point. One touch point. Very difficult. So if you want to go big, bold, and go large, shall we say, on LinkedIn or go large on any platform, you have to appreciate the sheer consistent effort you will have to throw at it. And it will be hours per day. It will not be minutes per day. And so the reason why I'm talking about this is because I want to give some people listening to me a dose of realism. That if you want to be, blue top voiced, you want 50,000 followers, you want 5, 10, 15 million content impressions, that needs to be built. And it will take you effort, hours of effort. And anybody who tells you otherwise is not being truthful. I know how much time I put on my LinkedIn. I know how much time other people put in their LinkedIn, and I can tell you 100% it will be hours per day. Hours. Now, is that the only way? Is that the only way? So human beings, for some reason, we love to think in extremes. So we think content or cold DMs. We don't think, there's space in between that. There's a process in between that can make a difference. We either want people banging down our doors to work with us, or we feel like we must bang other people's doors down. But there's a space in the middle. And this is what I've struggled to articulate in posts and in blogs. That space in the middle is a space where you don't have to be an all singing, all dancing marketer. You don't have to be an influencer, and you don't have to be a skilled salesperson. But you do have to really focus in on what am I selling and to who. People often ask me, Dean, I want to build my platform on LinkedIn. I want to get following. I want to sell products and services. And I ask them when they onboard on my accelerator, I ask them, how much money do you want to make? And they tell me how much money they want to make. And I say, well, the best way to make that money is to go after a small audience. And they look at me sometimes like I'm absolutely insane. Some don't. They look at me and go, yeah, you're absolutely right, Dean. I just need to focus on selling one thing to one person. And I don't need a ton of them to make a sale. And this is the thing. If you're selling a high ticket service, £2,000, £3,000, £4,000 or more, you don't need many leads to make bank. You don't need many clients. And so inadvertently what happens is that allure of big, bold numbers, all that kind of rah, rah, rah of, engagement, virality, following, sometimes that can override our good sense. And instead of just talking to people, instead of just finding half a dozen interested people, we go on this mission to change the world. And I had some coaching about this. a few years ago, because I'm very passionate about, I want to help 1 million businesses, and I want to, really empower people to start businesses. And my coach said to me, Dean, you have to understand that to impact 1 million businesses, you have to be able to finance that effort of reaching 1 million businesses, because you're not going to have 1 million customers. And I was like, what does he mean? What's he saying here? And basically what he's saying is, You have to have a viable business to pursue that big goal. You have to have a business that allows you to focus on that big goal. And I had this dawning realization that Dean can't focus on that big goal. Dean can't get the big goals he wants out of his business. The fact that I want to do less now than I did 10 years ago. I want to kind of enjoy it a little bit more. I don't want to run around like a crazy person anymore. I did all that 10 years ago. I want to enjoy it a bit more, get more fulfillment from what I'm doing. And my coach said to me, you have to build the fundamentals of your business in the way it works for you so that you can go do that. In other words, he was saying to me, Dean, you have to not be in feast and famine mode. You have to get your business out of that place. And this was a massive transformation for me, huge transformation, because it forced me to think about, how am I running my business, and will my business get me to where I want? And long term, I want to impact the world. I want to make a difference. I want to help people start businesses, all of that stuff. But that comes from having a successful platform to build off of. And so Maverick is my platform. Maverick is the platform to be able to do all of that stuff. So Maverick has to not just make me money, it has to provide me with the time and the freedom to be able to pursue those big goals, those next stage goals that I want to achieve. But what I was doing years back was the other way around. I was trying to do the big goal without having the foundation. In other words, at my foundations at that time, Maverick wasn't fully established. The processes, the systems weren't in place to be able to take care of clients, onboard clients, look after all that process. It wasn't in the place that it is today. And it wasn't in the place where I had the time to be able to focus. So what am I saying here? I did not pursue growth of following, growth of audience and engagement and all of that stuff until late last year. I have made more than $1 million a year from my LinkedIn activity and all the stuff I do on LinkedIn for the last 5 years. Now, this year, I'm getting more picky about the work I do and the way I do it, and what work I'll take on and what work I won't, because my big goal is there. But very little of it relied on high numbers. Most of it relied on the right people. And this is a concept I talk about with our accelerators a lot, of your most valuable clients. If you're selling a £4,000 or £5,000 service, and it's you delivering that service, and there's no cost, so it's pretty much, there's no cost of sale per se. It's pretty much all profit, gross profit. That's your money. Then it's got to fund your work, your efforts, what have you. But if that's the case, you don't need thousands of clients to actually make serious money. If you're a solopreneur listening to me, you might need, in the next year or in the next 9 months or whatever, you might only need 30 clients. Some of you might only need 3. But what happens is we go to LinkedIn and we get sucked into this world where it's about the number of impressions, it's about the number of followers, and it's about the number of all of these things. And all of those impressions, followers, engagements, all of that stuff matters. But it doesn't matter initially. I would argue until you're making 200,000-300,000 a year in sales from LinkedIn, you don't really need to worry about all those things. Those things are like next phase. And if you look, there are 2 types of influencer on all social media. There are the people who've actually built something and then become an influencer. And then there's the people who've been an influencer from day one. They've just become an influencer, but they didn't have a business before that. That was it. They worked for somebody else or what have you. If you notice, it's always the influencers who've built their business who make the most money. So I can think of a load of names I could rhyme out here, but the ones that make the most money are not the ones who have never run a business or they've quit another job. The businesses the influencers that make the most money actually have a business behind them. And what I'm saying in this episode, and hopefully you get this, is build the business first. Build the business first. Get that minimum viable audience, small number of people who absolutely get you, absolutely make the money, get the foundations laid. I know this isn't popular because I'm telling you that impressions, likes, and comments don't necessarily matter. And initially, they don't. They really don't. It's popular and it would be great for me to go on LinkedIn and say, here's how to get 10,000 followers in 30 days. And I could do that. I could show you how to do that. The problem is that won't build a business. And my mission is to actually help people build businesses. And I know that whilst, yes, that can be helpful further down the road, the first phase of any business is to have a stable revenue stream. That means then a business owner can put systems in place, can outsource, can start to feel the benefit of their business beyond that crazy phase of getting going. They can start to get to that next level, which is stability, predictability, and then they do the exciting stuff off of that. And many businesses see it differently. And I understand people who see it differently, but I used to see it differently. I used to go, well, if I can just get that 100,000, if I can just get to 35 million impressions, if I can just get to 100,000 followers, it will all. And my coach a few years said back to me, it said, no, Dean, no. Get the business foundation right, get the revenue right, get the profitability right. Then that's all gravy. Because I know, there are people on social media right now making more money without posting. There are people on LinkedIn who make more money without posting. Now, we might not like their tactic. That's fair enough. But it's doable to not have to depend on likes, comments, impressions. It's doable to not have to rest on how many followers you've got. Now, my method's slightly different because it blends a bit of content and a bit of outreach, but warm outreach from a very specific mechanism and process. But what I'm trying to say in this is, it's as you're thinking about how do I build that next level? How do I build that predictability and consistency and flow so that it's not like feast and famine? It's not about skipping a level and trying to blow up and hope that will work it all out, because it rarely does. It's about building boring lead generation systems that just work day in, day out, day in, day out, day in, day out. And I realized for a long time I was kind of hooked on their cut and thrust of it. We've got to get clients, we've got to do this, and the kind of adventure of it. And then as I've got older, I've realized, I'm not really up for that anymore. I'm not really up for that. And it was my coach a few years ago who helped me see this. It's not what you want, really, is it, Dean? I mean, I like the excitement of going and doing things and crazy stuff, and I love all that. But actually, what really propelled our growth was when I realized that's not what really I was up for. What I'm really up for is building something so I can do the stuff I really want to do. And that means having free time. That means not running crazy miles an hour. That means having time to think. That means not having the pressures of having to do something every single day, and I could just literally switch off on one day and do nothing. That is the place you want to do some things from. And to do that, you need a process and a system to actually bring you consistent revenue. And so the reason I'm talking about this is because I have recently been chatting to somebody who had a really brilliant idea for a business. Absolutely fantastic. I'm not going to mention their name here because I don't want to. I haven't asked them, can I share this? And I was chatting with them, and it's just really good business, really good business. But they've avoided um, they've avoided doing the fundamentals and chased the glitz. So rather than try and get their first 10 clients, they have a subscription model. Rather than get their first 10 clients on, they've gone for these big campaigns and burnt money. And guess what? They went to, like, if they were in startup phase, they went to like phase 3 rather than phase 2 or phase 1. And instead of going, right, let's get our first, 100 grand of recurring revenue done and nailed, they went for, let's try and get to our first million of recurring revenue. And they basically ran out of money. They were juggling everything. It was working. And then basically the money dried up. And so he has now had to lay some people off. He was trying to pursue like a big influencer status on LinkedIn to try and blow it up. And that has all gone sideways. He feels like an idiot because he'd been talking it up on LinkedIn, as we all do. And now is basically working a job and building that first 100K of recurring revenue again. And it's a mistake we can all make. And we might not make it on that scale, but we can all go through the motions. And there's like the people in crazy mode, constantly crazy mode. And then there's the people who try and go from crazy mode straight up to phase 2 and miss that bit in the middle. I've got the consistency, I'm making bank, I've got the plan, the money's working, I don't have to chase my tail. That's the first stage. And whether that's your first 100 grand, 200 grand, I don't know what it is. It'll be different for all of you. But that's the first thing. You've got to get that nailed, because from that, you can start to leverage outsourcing because you can afford to. You can start to leverage all these different tools, and you're not doing it from a position of panic. You're doing it from a position of, let's really think this through and make this difference. And whether you're a solopreneur and you're doing 50 grand right now, or you're a solopreneur doing 250 grand right now, the same things apply. You have to be able to have a systemized way to bring clients on board that does not mean you selling your soul to your business. You cannot be the slave to your business. And I know that's a loaded word these days, but I've done it. I've really done it. In the quest of building a business, I put the business first over and over and over again. I don't think through. I'm running a million miles an hour. I'm not thinking through long-term strategy. I'm only thinking short-term. And then I get so far and realize, why does it feel like this business, I work for this business and the business is my master? It's because you never escape crazy mode. That first phase of getting that business off the ground, a lot of people never get out of that. And as a result, this is what tends to happen, they either slow down and go, let's rethink this and let's go and adapt this and get out of that crazy mode. They either force themselves into a new mode of working, which is what I advocate for, or they end up going into, do you know what, this isn't my thing, and they lose the love for what they started, because the freedom never comes their way. It's always just over the horizon. It's just there somewhere, and it's never there. So think about where you are. Think about where you are right now. Does your business give you the things that you want from it? When you started, what were the things you wanted from it? Now think about, what are you doing on a daily basis to actually move towards those things? Or are you having to work yourself just to sustain the business? Or is the business working to sustain you? Think about that. Because I meet lots of people who are in that place, and some of them I can't, some of them I talk to and they'd be perfect for my program, but I won't onboard them because their financial situation is not great. You need to think about, where do you want to be in your business? What are the primary goals you want from your business? And then look at your activity and whether the activities you're doing on a daily basis are actually moving you there. And I mean directly moving you there, because I've seen this and I've had this myself, where I've kind of attached my goals to the end of the business goals. In other words, if the business makes this much, I can make this much. No, I want to make X. How is the business going to help me do that? We have to have what we as business owners want from the business has to be clear in our minds, so that when we operate the business, we are moving towards those goals. Yes, we want to do a good job for customers and all that kind of stuff, but ultimately, you want to profit from your business. And I know that's a dirty word these days, but you want to profit from your business. So design it, build it, so that you get what you want out of it. So if you don't want to be in crazy mode, feast and famine, running around like a lunatic, you have to choose that. You have to design that. If you want to get that stability, so you're not running around, you have to choose that. And you don't want to be chasing a bigger strategy than you can afford. I'll just unpack that actually for a minute. Earlier, I talked about how building that big platform and going for thousands of people and reaching people and hoping to attract clients like clockwork just from content is not something that comes easy. And you cannot, if you're in crazy mode, you cannot afford that strategy. The first strategy you need is you need leads consistently every week, whether or not your content is good, bad, or ugly. If you've got shit content, you still need to be able to make sales, right? Let's just face it. If you're not getting followers, you still need to be able to make sales. You need a system to do that. That's what I teach people. Now, once you've got that system, once you've got that consistent sales, once you've got all of that, by all means, double down on content, make your content fly, make it sing, grow the followers, do all of that stuff. But don't do that thinking it's going to get you out of feast and famine. It's a bad idea. Trust me, it's a bad idea. I'd love to know what you think of this. This has been something that's weighing on my mind, and I'm not sure how I articulate this, because when you write articles and posts, it often comes out binary. It's like, don't pursue followers, don't post content. I'm not saying that. I'm not saying engagement is irrelevant. I'm not saying followers are irrelevant. But what I am saying is, if you're in feast and famine mode, if you don't have predictable lead flow, if you don't have consistent revenue and clients, that is the first priority. And if you've got goals from your business, that they are your first priority. Work out how you're going to get there. Otherwise, if you stay feast and famine, you will end up serving your business, or as they say, building a golden jail. You have a great revenue, you have lots of things going, but it feels like prison. So I'd love to chat to anybody who resonates with this message. I'd love your feedback on this. If you agree with me, I'd love to know. If you disagree with me, I'd love to know. But fundamentally, you want to get the stability in your business and end feast and famine first. And that comes from not doing it with as little following as possible. You don't need tens of thousands of people to get 200 grand coming into your business every year. It just doesn't need to be that way. We're talking about 100 people. In all reality, we're talking about you needing to influence 100 people to get to about 200 grand, depending on your offer, but about 100 people. So depth is more valuable in the short term. Anyway, I'm going to shut up. I'd love to hear your thoughts on this. Please do let me know. Come find me on LinkedIn. Love to hear your thoughts, and have a great April. It's April the 1st today as I'm recording this. So have a great April. and knuckle down, do the work, win the business, and have an awesome month.